The chamber was restless, humming with the low static of murmurs and the staccato flashes of cameras. Every seat was filled, every eye locked forward, as Senator Lindsey Graham leaned across the desk with the swagger of a man who thought he already owned the moment. His voice cut sharp through the tension, pointed and theatrical. Every syllable meant not just for Jasmine Crockett, but for the millions watching beyond those walls. He jabbed with questions that sounded less like a search for truth and more like traps, his tone dripping with the kind of condescension he'd perfected over decades. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett sat still, her expression unreadable, her hands resting on a folder she had yet to open. Her calmness was unnerving, almost defiant, and it only seemed to agitate Graham further. He pressed harder, voice rising, each line crafted to box her in, to rattle her composure, to make her stumble in front of the country. The smirk that curled at the edge of his lips told the story of a man convinced he was about to deliver a career-defining blow. And then, silence. Crockett did not flinch, did not stammer, did not even blink. For a heartbeat, the room seemed suspended, a collective inhale holding everyone in place. The chatter died, the lenses focused. All that remained was a tension so thick it could be felt in the chest. The narrator's voice pierces the freeze. What happened next? Nobody in that room was prepared for, because in that folder before her, the one she touched so lightly with her fingertips, was not just paper. It was power. It was the quiet, devastating weight of preparation. Evidence, timelines, contradictions, everything she needed to turn the moment on its head. She didn't have to raise her voice or mirror his theatrics. All she had to do was wait, steady and unshaken, for the perfect instant. And as the chamber leaned forward, as viewers around the nation gripped their screens, Graham had no idea he was seconds away from watching his attack implode. But to understand the magnitude of this moment, we need to rewind. The hearing wasn't just another line on the congressional calendar. It was theater, broadcast live into living rooms, airports, coffee shops, and phones across the country. America, fractured and weary, tuned in not because they expected reasoned debate, but because they knew spectacle was coming. These rooms had become battlefields where reputations were forged or destroyed, where every soundbite could ricochet across the internet within seconds. And on this day, Lindsey Graham believed it was his turn to claim the spotlight. He had studied the optics, how to lean forward with authority, how to lace his words with equal parts sarcasm and certainty. For him, it wasn't simply about questioning policy or pressing for truth. It was about sending a message that he could put Jasmine Crockett, a rising voice with sharp wit and sharper resolve, firmly in her place. In his calculation, she was young enough, new enough, and above all, confident enough that if he broke her on national television, he could remind America who held the gavel of control. But what Graham failed to measure was the moment itself. This wasn't an empty room of tired bureaucrats. This was an America already fed up with arrogance disguised as authority. Viewers carried their own bruises into this chamber. Immigrants who had endured condescension, families who had seen leaders sneer at their struggles, communities who had long been told to sit quietly while power played its games. To them, every word Graham threw across that desk wasn't just aimed at Crockett. It was aimed at all of them, and that's why the stakes were higher than even he realized. This wasn't just a sparring match between two lawmakers. This was a proxy war for dignity itself, fought in the glare of the cameras. Every insult he launched tightened the coil of frustration among those watching, building the hunger for a counterstrike that could puncture the facade of arrogance. Jasmine Crockett knew it. She didn't need to match his tone or mimic his aggression. Her composure, her stillness, was itself a statement, a refusal to play the game on his terms. Yet beneath that calm exterior, she had prepared meticulously, line by line, document by document. That folder wasn't an accessory. It was a shield and a sword, both at once, and the country could sense it. They didn't know what was inside, but they could feel its weight in the way she let it rest between her hands. Twitter threads speculated in real time. Commentators whispered to each other on background feeds. Ordinary viewers, sitting on couches or scrolling through live streams, leaned forward with the same anticipation they would for the climax of a thriller, because everyone loves to see arrogance challenged. Everyone longs for the moment when bluster collapses under the weight of truth, and Jasmine Crockett, with her steady eyes and untouched composure, was telegraphing one message without saying a word. She had something he couldn't stop. What Crockett was holding in her folder would soon change everything. Lindsey Graham has always been a survivor. His career is a study in political elasticity, bending and twisting to fit whichever current of power ran strongest at the time. In the earliest days, he carved out a reputation as a hard-nosed prosecutor in South Carolina, a man who projected toughness and discipline. When he entered Congress, he leaned into that image, branding himself as a straight shooter, unafraid to take unpopular positions. But as the years wore on, something shifted. What had once been framed as principle began to look more like performance, and Graham's compass seemed to spin wherever opportunity pointed. He attacked Bill Clinton with righteous fury during impeachment, then struck deals with Democrats when it suited him. He once called Donald Trump a kook, unfit for office, only to later become one of his most loyal allies when the winds changed. Each reversal left a residue of disbelief among observers, but Graham treated it like a badge of craftiness, proof that he could outlast others by never staying tethered to any one conviction. That slipperiness gave him longevity, but it also earned him a reputation. A man who would say anything, do anything, align with anyone, if it meant staying near the spotlight. And with that reputation came arrogance, the sort of confidence that grows from believing you can outmaneuver everyone else in the room. Colleagues noticed it in the way he spoke during hearings, often dripping with sarcasm, as though his real audience wasn't the witness across from him, but the cameras trained on his face. He would lean back, smirk, deliver one-liners designed for headlines, and bask in the attention they generated. To critics, he was less a senator than a showman, always auditioning for his next viral moment. And for years it worked. That arrogance, however, carried an unmistakable edge of condescension. He reserved his sharpest barbs for those he perceived as younger, newer, or untested. In his mind, politics was a hierarchy, and he had earned his perch at the top. To challenge him, to defy him, was to invite the full weight of his theatrical scorn, and few embodied the target for that scorn more clearly than Jasmine Crockett. Young, outspoken, unapologetically herself, she was the antithesis of the clubby, deferential culture Graham had mastered. When Crockett entered Congress, Graham and others like him saw not just a freshman lawmaker, but a threat, a woman who refused to shrink under the gaze of established power, a voice unwilling to soften its edges for comfort. And so, when the hearing placed her across from him, Graham viewed it as an opportunity, not simply to score points on policy, but to humiliate her in front of a national audience. In his mind, it was an easy play. He had decades of experience, an arsenal of sharp lines, and the platform of seniority. She, he assumed, would stumble under the glare, scramble for words, or lose her cool. And when she did, he would deliver the final blow, sealing the moment into a soundbite he could replay for donors, constituents, and cable news panels. What Graham didn't calculate was how deeply the country had grown weary of this act. To many, he no longer represented strength or mastery. He represented the entitlement of a political class that had grown too comfortable mocking those who dared to rise. His flip-flops weren't cleverness anymore. They were hypocrisy. His smirk wasn't charm. It was arrogance. His performances didn't feel sharp. They felt stale, yet Graham still walked into that chamber as though he owned it. He carried the confidence of a man convinced the script would play out as it always had, the veteran belittling the newcomer, the camera capturing the imbalance of power. He leaned forward, rehearsed lines sharpened like knives, certain this was his stage. But arrogance has a weakness, and Crockett was about to expose it. Jasmine Crockett's story does not begin in the gilded halls of Washington. It begins in the grit of everyday America, in the communities that too often bear the brunt of inequality while being told to wait their turn for justice. She grew up with the clarity of someone who understood struggle not as an abstraction, but as a reality shaping lives around her. That foundation, humble, raw, and real, would become the backbone of everything she carried with her into politics. Before she was Congresswoman Crockett, she was Attorney Crockett, a defender of those whose voices were often silenced. She built her reputation not by catering to the powerful, but by standing alongside the powerless. While others chased lucrative careers in corporate law, she walked a different path, representing clients who couldn't afford a high-priced defense, challenging systems that seemed designed to break them, and reminding courtrooms that justice wasn't supposed to be reserved for the privileged few. Every late